There are two fighter jets sitting at the center of European air power right now. Two machines built by two different nations, representing two completely different philosophies about what a modern combat aircraft should be. One is the Eurofighter Typhoon, a multi-nation collaboration that took decades to build and became one of the most agile supersonic jets ever designed. The other is the Dassault Rafale, a French masterpiece of engineering that France built entirely on its own, refusing to compromise its vision for anyone. Both jets are in active service right now. Both are being exported to allies around the world. Both carry nuclear weapons. Both can fight in the air and strike targets on the ground with equal lethality. And both nations that build them will tell you with complete conviction that their aircraft is the superior machine. So which one actually wins? That question is not as simple as it sounds, and the answer when you dig into the real details will genuinely surprise you. Before we go any further, please take a second to subscribe if you have not already. Over 98% of viewers watch without subscribing. It costs you nothing and it helps more people find content like this. Now let us get into it. To understand this rivalry properly, you cannot just look at speed numbers and weapons lists. You have to understand why these two jets exist in the first place, because the story of how they came to be tells you almost everything about what they are designed to do. It is a story that starts in the 1980s, when Europe looked at the aging fleet of jets protecting its skies and realized it was falling behind. The Cold War was still burning hot. Soviet aircraft were becoming more capable. And several European nations, including the United Kingdom, West Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, decided they needed a next-generation fighter. They wanted to build it together, pooling resources and sharing the enormous cost of developing a cutting-edge combat aircraft. The project was called the Future European Fighter Aircraft. It sounded like a perfect partnership. Multiple powerful nations, shared funding, shared technology, one incredible airplane. But partnerships between proud nations with different military needs and different industrial ambitions are never simple. And this one was about to fracture in a way that would reshape European aviation for the next 4 decades. France was the problem, or depending on your perspective, France was the visionary. The French had a very specific requirement that the other nations did not share. France needed its fighter to operate from aircraft carriers. The French Navy maintained a carrier fleet and needed a jet light enough and robust enough to survive the violent catapult launches and arrested landings of carrier operations. The other nations had no such requirement. They wanted a land-based fighter optimized for air superiority over Europe. That fundamental disagreement in what the aircraft needed to do meant France could not fully commit to the shared design. In 1985, France walked away from the collaborative project. They would build their own aircraft entirely on their own terms. That aircraft became the Rafale. The remaining nations, the United Kingdom, West Germany, Italy, and Spain, continued developing their joint fighter. That aircraft became the Eurofighter Typhoon. So from the very beginning, these two jets were built from different philosophies, different priorities, and different visions. The Typhoon was a product of compromise between allies. The Rafale was a product of uncompromising national vision. That origin story matters because it echoes in every single specification, every design choice, and every capability comparison between these two machines today. Let us start with the Eurofighter Typhoon, because to understand what this jet is, you need to appreciate what an extraordinary engineering achievement it represents. 4 nations, 4 sets of military requirements, 4 industrial bases, 4 governments, and 1 airplane that had to make all of them happy. The Typhoon first flew in 1994 and entered service in 2003. By that point, the world had already changed dramatically. The Cold War was over. The threat was no longer massed Soviet tank formations rolling through the Fulda Gap. The threat had become asymmetric, dispersed, and unpredictable. But the Typhoon had been designed for a very specific kind of war, and that specific design made it exceptionally good at certain things. The Typhoon is a canard delta configuration aircraft. That means it has a large triangular delta wing and smaller canard foreplanes mounted ahead of the cockpit. This configuration gives the aircraft extraordinary agility at high speeds and high altitudes. At supersonic speeds, particularly above 30,000 feet, the Typhoon is essentially unmatched among European fighters. It can supercruise, meaning it can sustain supersonic flight without using fuel-burning afterburners, reaching speeds around Mach 1.5 in supercruise. That matters enormously in a real air battle because an aircraft that can fight supersonic without burning through its fuel reserve has a massive tactical advantage over one that needs afterburners to go fast. The Typhoon's kinematic performance, that combination of speed, climb rate, and energy management that determines who wins a turning fight in the sky, is genuinely world-class. In the high-altitude, high-speed envelope, the Typhoon can out-accelerate, out-climb, and out-energy almost any aircraft it is likely to face in European skies. It can reach altitudes above 55,000 feet. It has a top speed of around Mach 2. Its thrust-to-weight ratio, a measure of how much raw engine power it has relative to its own weight, is greater than 1, meaning it can accelerate while pointing straight up. Those numbers are not just impressive on a specification sheet. They translate to real tactical advantages in the kind of high-altitude interception missions the Typhoon was fundamentally designed for. Think about what a NATO air defense scenario looks like. Enemy aircraft approaching at high altitude and high speed. A defender that needs to detect, intercept, and destroy them before they can release weapons. In that specific scenario, the Typhoon is a magnificent machine. The Typhoon is powered by two EJ-200 turbofan engines, each producing around 20,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner. These engines were specifically designed for the Eurofighter program by a consortium of European engine manufacturers, and they are genuinely excellent powerplants. Reliable, powerful, and designed to give the Typhoon the raw energy it needs to dominate the high-altitude arena. The aircraft uses a digital fly-by-wire control system with artificial stability, meaning it is aerodynamically unstable by design. That instability is deliberate. An unstable aircraft is harder to fly manually, but it is dramatically more agile than a stable one. The computer manages the instability hundreds of times per second, giving the pilot an aircraft that responds instantly and precisely to every input while remaining controllable. The result is an aircraft that can perform maneuvers that would be physically impossible in a conventionally stable design. The Typhoon's avionics suite has evolved significantly over its service life. The Captory AESA radar, which stands for Active Electronically Scanned Array, is now being fitted to many Typhoon airframes. AESA radars are the gold standard in modern fighter aviation. They can track multiple targets simultaneously, are extremely difficult to jam, can switch between air-to-air and air-to-ground modes almost instantly, and have a low radar emission signature that makes it harder for enemies to detect that they are being scanned. The Typhoon also carries the Praetorian Defensive Aids subsystem, a comprehensive electronic warfare suite that helps protect the aircraft from surface-to-air missiles and enemy radar. In terms of weapons, the Typhoon can carry a formidable array. The Meteor Beyond Visual Range air-to-air missile is arguably the most capable air-to-air missile in the world right now. Its ramjet propulsion gives it a no-escape zone, the area within which a target literally cannot outrun or outmaneuver the missile, that is significantly larger than competing American, French, and Russian missiles. The Typhoon also carries the IRIS-T short-range missile for close combat, Brimstone anti-armor missiles, Paveway laser-guided bombs, Storm Shadow cruise missiles, and for the nations that require it, the WE-177 nuclear capability in British service has been replaced by the American B-61 gravity bomb under NATO nuclear sharing arrangements. The Typhoon has seen real combat. Royal Air Force Typhoons conducted extensive strike operations over Libya in 2011 under Operation El Ami, dropping laser-guided bombs and flying thousands of sorties. RAF Typhoons have also conducted airstrikes in Iraq and Syria against ISIS targets. German Typhoons have participated in NATO Baltic air policing missions, intercepting Russian aircraft near NATO airspace. Saudi Arabian Typhoons have been heavily involved in combat operations in Yemen. The aircraft has a real operational record, and it is not just a showroom aircraft that looks good on paper. But the Typhoon has a complicated history that reveals something important about its character. For most of its early service life, the Typhoon was almost exclusively an air superiority fighter. It had limited ground attack capability. The reason goes back to that four-nation design process. Different member nations had different priorities for the aircraft's development, and adding comprehensive ground attack capability required expensive software upgrades, new weapon integrations, and political agreement between four governments about how to share the costs. That process was slow and sometimes contentious. The result was that for its first several years of service, the Typhoon was a world-class air superiority fighter that could do relatively little against targets on the ground. That limitation has been addressed over time through what are called tranche upgrades, essentially successive batches of improvements that have progressively added ground attack capability. But it took years and significant investment to get there. And that history tells you something fundamental about the Typhoon. It was designed from the soul outward as an air superiority fighter. Everything else has been added on. Now let us talk about the Rafale, because this aircraft is something quite different in almost every respect. When France walked away from the collaborative program in 1985, they were making a bet. The bet was that they could build a better aircraft on their own than they could build by committee. And in many ways, that bet paid off in ways that even France's critics have had to acknowledge. The Dassault Rafale first flew in 1986 as a technology demonstrator and entered French service in 2001. Like the Typhoon, it is a Canard Delta aircraft with digital fly-by-wire controls and two powerful turbofan engines. The SNECMA M88 engines each produce around 17,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner, which is somewhat less than the Typhoon's EJ200s, and that difference matters in cert performance comparisons. The Rafale has a lower top speed than the Typhoon, reaching around Mach 1.8 rather than Mach 2. Its supercruise capability while present is less impressive than the Typhoon's. In a straight race to altitude at high speed, the Typhoon is the faster, more powerful aircraft. If you judge fighters purely on raw kinematic performance at high altitude, the Typhoon comes out ahead. But the Rafale was never designed to be the fastest or the highest flying aircraft. It was designed to be the most complete aircraft. Dassault's philosophy, shaped by France's unique military requirements, was that a modern combat aircraft should be able to do everything well rather than one thing brilliantly. France needed an aircraft that could fly from aircraft carriers and from land bases. France needed an aircraft that could shoot down enemy jets and bomb enemy ground targets with equal proficiency. France needed an aircraft that could fly nuclear deterrence missions, conventional strike missions, maritime strike missions, close air support missions, and reconnaissance missions. And France needed all of those capabilities in one airframe, because France could not afford to buy and maintain multiple specialized fleets. That requirement produced an aircraft that is, by any objective measure, the most versatile combat jet currently in European service. The Rafale spectro-electronic warfare system is considered by many independent analysts to be the most capable integrated electronic warfare suite on any Western fighter outside of the American F-22 and F-35. Spectre does not just detect radar threats. It identifies them, classifies them, locates them, jams them, and can defeat them with active electronic attack in ways that are classified but known to be highly effective. In exercises, aircraft equipped with Spectra have demonstrated the ability to degrade the tracking capability of surface-to-air missile systems significantly enough to affect their ability to engage the Rafale. That is a decisive operational advantage. The Rafale's RBE-2AA AESA radar is an excellent system, broadly comparable to the Typhoon's captory in capability, though both France and the EUROFIGHTER consortium will argue passionately about whose radar is superior. What is less debatable is the Rafale's sensor fusion capability. The Rafale integrates data from its radar, its electro-optical sensors, its electronic warfare system, and its data link into a single coherent tactical picture for the pilot. That integration is extremely sophisticated and was designed into the aircraft from the beginning rather than added through upgrades. The pilot sees one picture that combines everything the aircraft knows about the tactical environment, making situational awareness faster and more intuitive. That matters in combat because a pilot who understands the tactical situation faster than the enemy makes better decisions and makes them sooner. The Rafale is a smaller aircraft than the Typhoon. It weighs less, has less wing area, and carries somewhat less fuel internally. In a prolonged high-altitude dogfight at supersonic speeds, that translates to disadvantages in energy and endurance relative to the Typhoon. But the Rafale has remarkable low-speed agility. At the slow speeds of a visual range-turning engagement, the Rafale's aerodynamics and control authority make it an extremely difficult opponent. It can sustain turns that bleed energy from its opponent and maintain control in flight regimes that would challenge many other fighters. And then there is the carrier capability. The Rafale M, the naval variant operated by the French Navy, is cleared to operate from France's aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle. That makes it one of only two non-American carrier-capable fighters in the world, the other being the Russian MiG-29K. Building an aircraft that can survive carrier operations while also being a world-class combat jet is an extraordinarily difficult engineering challenge. The Rafale M does it, and does it without the significant performance compromises that carrier modifications have imposed on other aircraft. The airframe was designed from the start to handle carrier loads. There are no serious capability gaps between the land-based Rafale C and the carrier-based Rafale M. In terms of weapons, the Rafale carries the MBDA Meteor missile for beyond visual range combat, just like the Typhoon. It also carries the Mica missile family for short-range combat and as a complementary medium-range option. For ground attack, the Rafale carries the Scalp cruise missile, which is the French designation for essentially the same weapon as the British Storm Shadow. It carries laser-guided bombs, the AASM Hammer precision-guided munition, which uses a combination of GPS and infrared guidance to hit targets with remarkable accuracy in any weather, and anti-ship missiles including the Exocet, a weapon with a combat-proven reputation going back to the Falklands War. And for France's nuclear deterrent, the Rafale carries the ASMPA nuclear-armed cruise missile, a supersonic nuclear weapon with a range of several hundred kilometers. That nuclear capability is not a secondary mission for the Rafale, it is a primary one. France's independent nuclear deterrent, the force de frappe, is one of the foundations of French defense policy, and the Rafale is the aircraft that delivers it. The Rafale's combat record is extensive and impressive. French Rafales conducted strikes in Afghanistan as part of NATO operations. They operated over Libya in 2011, flying both air superiority and strike missions from the very first days of the conflict. Rafales have struck targets in Mali, in the Central African Republic, in Iraq, and in Syria. The French Navy's Rafale MS have launched strikes from the Charles de Gaulle in multiple theaters. In every one of those combat environments, the Rafale has performed well without significant operational losses attributable to the aircraft's performance or systems. That is not a trivial record. Combat experience reveals things about aircraft that no exercise ever can. Now let us talk about exports, because the export market tells you something important about how the world perceives these two aircraft, and this is an area where the comparison becomes genuinely interesting. For many years, the Rafale struggled to export itself anywhere. France put the aircraft on the market and lost competition after competition. South Korea chose the F-15K, Singapore chose the F-15SG, Morocco chose the F-16. Brazil went through a drawn-out competition that France ultimately won, but only after years of uncertainty. The United Arab Emirates chose the F-16EF Block 60. Some analysts began calling the Rafale a superb aircraft that nobody wanted to buy, and the phrase "the eternal loser in export competitions" followed the aircraft like a shadow. That narrative reflected real commercial frustration, but did not accurately capture what was happening. The Rafale's export difficulties were partly about American competition, which is formidable and backed by political relationships and industrial offset arrangements that are almost impossible to match. They were partly about price because the Rafale is not cheap, and they were partly about the reality that France, unlike the United States, had for many years been reluctant to offer the same full-capability aircraft to export customers that it operated itself. Concerns about technology transfer and the sensitivity of systems like Spectrum meant that France sometimes offered export customers a slightly degraded version. That changed. France began offering export customers access to essentially the full-capability Rafale, and the results were dramatic. Egypt ordered Rafales in 2015, becoming the first export customer. Qatar ordered Rafales in 2016. India ordered Rafales in a massive deal, eventually taking 36 aircraft in a direct government-to-government purchase. Greece ordered Rafales, Croatia ordered Rafales, Indonesia ordered Rafales. The UAE, which had previously chosen American aircraft, ordered 80 Rafales in 2021 in one of the largest fighter deals in history. Saudi Arabia is in discussions. Serbia is in discussions. The Rafale's export fortunes turned around dramatically, and the aircraft now competes successfully across multiple continents. The Eurofighter Typhoon has its own export successes. Saudi Arabia operates a large fleet of Typhoons and is one of the largest Typhoon operators in the world. Kuwait has ordered Typhoons. Qatar actually ordered both Typhoons and Rafales, operating both types, which makes it one of the few nations in the world in a position to provide a real operational comparison between the two aircraft. Oman operates Typhoons. The Typhoon has performed well in competitions where American aircraft are excluded or where European solidarity plays a role. But the Typhoon faces a different kind of export challenge. When a customer buys a Typhoon, they are not just buying from Britain or Germany or Italy or Spain. They are buying from a four-nation consortium, and every major decision about what capabilities can be exported, what weapons can be integrated, and what upgrades will be available requires agreement from all four partner nations. That process can be slow and sometimes frustrating for export customers who want faster decisions and more flexibility. The Rafale's single-nation origin means France can make those decisions faster and with more flexibility, which in a competitive export market matters enormously. Now let us get into the specific performance comparisons that people actually argue about, because there are several key areas where these two aircraft are genuinely different, and understanding those differences is essential to understanding which jet wins in which scenario. The first comparison is raw air-to-air performance, the ability to detect the enemy, engage them at long range, and survive a close-range fight if it comes to that. At long range, beyond visual range combat, both aircraft are now equipped with the Meteor missile, which is genuinely the best air-to-air missile currently in operational service anywhere in the world. So in terms of their primary long-range weapon, they are essentially equal. The aircraft that wins a beyond visual range engagement is the one that detects the enemy first, fires first, and provides the best support to the missile during its flight. Radar performance and sensor fusion are therefore decisive. The Captori on the Typhoon and the RBE-2AA on the Rafale are both AESA radars and both excellent systems. Independent assessments generally rate them as broadly comparable with different strengths in different aspects of performance. Neither aircraft has a decisive radar advantage over the other at this level of capability. In close-range visual combat, the assessment changes somewhat depending on altitude and speed. At high altitude and high speed, the Typhoon's superior engine power and energy retention give it an edge. The Typhoon can dictate the terms of a high-speed, high-altitude engagement in ways the Rafale finds harder to match. At low altitude and low speed in the knife fight turning engagements that test an aircraft's low speed agility, the competition is much closer. The Rafale's aerodynamics are very well optimized for the slower speed end of the envelope, and its thrust vectoring absent but compensated by other aerodynamic features gives it good low-speed control. Both aircraft are formidable in a turning fight, but the Typhoon's energy advantage means it can often choose to avoid the kind of slow-speed fight where the Rafale is most competitive. An experienced Typhoon pilot will use the aircraft's superior speed and climb rate to force the engagement into the high-speed arena where the Typhoon has the advantage. An experienced Rafale pilot will try to force the fight slow and low where energy advantages matter less and where the Rafale's agility is most effective. In terms of electronic warfare, the Rafale Spectra system is generally regarded as superior to the Praetorian system on the Typhoon. Spectra is more comprehensive, more integrated with the aircraft's other systems, and more capable at active electronic jamming and deception. That is a significant advantage in a contested environment where surface-to-air missiles and airborne radar systems pose a constant threat. A more capable electronic warfare system means the Rafale can survive in higher threat environments and can degrade enemy capabilities more effectively than the Typhoon can with its defensive systems. The second major comparison is multi-role capability, the ability to transition between air superiority and ground attack missions. And here the Rafale has a structural advantage that is hard to argue away. The Rafale was designed from the beginning to be a multi-role aircraft. Its software, its weapons integration, its sensor suite, and its cockpit design all reflect a philosophy of seamless transition between air-to-air and ground attack missions. A Rafale pilot can be engaged in an air superiority mission and transition to ground attack with minimal relearning of procedures because the aircraft's interface is designed to be consistent across mission types. The Typhoon has overcome its early ground attack limitations through extensive upgrades, and a modern Tranche 3 Typhoon with full ground attack clearance is a very capable strike aircraft. But the architecture was added to a fundamentally air superiority design rather than built in from the start, and that difference shows up in operational terms in subtle but real ways. Nations that need an aircraft to do roughly equal amounts of air superiority and ground attack consistently find the Rafale more naturally suited to that balanced requirement. The third major comparison is survivability in contested airspace, which combines the aircraft's low observability, its electronic warfare capability, and its ability to survive in an environment where the enemy has modern air defenses and modern fighter aircraft. Neither the Typhoon nor the Rafale is a stealth aircraft in the way that the American F-22 or F-35 is. Both are fourth-generation plus fighters, meaning they have significant improvements over pure fourth-generation aircraft, but lack the full very low observable design that defines fifth-generation jets. The Rafale has a smaller radar cross-section than the Typhoon due to its smaller size, and some attention to radar reflection management in its design. But neither aircraft is stealthy by any meaningful definition of that word. Both would be detectable by modern radar systems at significant ranges. Where the Rafale has a meaningful survivability advantage is in that Spectra electronic warfare system. By actively jamming and deceiving enemy radar systems, Spectra allows the Rafale to operate in threat environments that would be more dangerous for the Typhoon with its less capable Praetorian system. That is not quite the same as stealth, but in some operational scenarios it provides a comparable effect. If you can make the enemy's radar unreliable enough, you achieve some of the tactical benefit of reduced detectability, even without reducing your actual radar cross-section. The fourth comparison is pilot workload and human-machine interface, which matters more than most people outside aviation realize. A fighter aircraft is only as effective as its pilot's ability to use it effectively under the extreme stress and time pressure of combat. An aircraft with superb capabilities that overwhelm the pilot with information or require too much cognitive effort to operate is less effective in combat than a slightly less capable aircraft with an interface that allows the pilot to focus on fighting rather than managing systems. The Rafale's sensor fusion and cockpit design have consistently received high marks from pilots who have flown it. The integration of radar, electro-optical targeting, electronic warfare, and data link into a single tactical picture that makes intuitive sense under pressure is a genuine operational advantage. The Typhoon's cockpit has improved significantly over its service life, and modern Typhoon pilots speak highly of their human-machine interface. But the Rafale's integrated approach was more ambitious from the beginning, and the results show in operational assessments. Let us talk about the one area where both aircraft face a challenge that is completely beyond their engineers' ability to solve, and that is the geopolitical reality of fifth-generation competition. Both the Typhoon and the Rafale are now facing competition from the American F-35 Lightning II in a way that affects how we should understand them. The F-35 is not just a better fighter, it is a different kind of fighter. Its very low observable design, meaning genuine stealth, its advanced sensor fusion, its ability to share data across a network of aircraft and ground systems in ways that fourth-generation aircraft cannot match, and its large-scale production that is driving down unit costs all represent a genuine qualitative leap that the Typhoon and Rafale cannot fully match regardless of upgrades. Several nations that were expected to buy Typhoons or Rafales have instead chosen F-35s. The Netherlands chose the F-35 over the Rafale after a competition that was widely expected to favor the French aircraft. Finland chose the F-35 over both the Typhoon and the Rafale in a competition that was enormous and closely watched. Norway chose the F-35. Denmark chose the F-35. The pattern is real and reflects something important about where air power is going. Both the Typhoon and Rafale are excellent fourth-generation plus aircraft, but they are not fifth-generation aircraft. In the long run, that matters. But here is where the analysis gets more nuanced, because the F-35 is not the right answer for every nation and every scenario. The F-35 is expensive to operate, depends heavily on American support infrastructure, and comes with significant constraints around what allies can and cannot do with the aircraft's software and systems. Nations that want genuine operational independence, the ability to upgrade their aircraft, integrate their own weapons, and make their own decisions about how and when to use their jets, find both the Typhoon and the Rafale more attractive than the F-35, even if the F-35 is more capable in certain specific scenarios. France operates the Rafale as the backbone of its independent deterrent. The last thing France wants is an aircraft whose operation depends on American software updates and American approval. The Typhoon, for all the complexity of its four-nation governance structure, gives its operators more autonomy than the F-35 does. That is a real and meaningful advantage in the current geopolitical environment, and it is one reason why neither the Typhoon nor the Rafale is going away anytime soon. Let us talk about the exercises where these two aircraft have been evaluated against each other and against common adversaries, because while most exercise results are classified, enough information has leaked or been officially released to provide some useful insights. In NATO exercises, Typhoons and Rafales regularly operate alongside each other and occasionally face each other in dissimilar air combat training, which is the military term for practice dogfights between different aircraft types. The results are not systematically released, but reports from various exercise scenarios have produced the same general pattern that the theoretical analysis suggests. The Typhoon performs better in high-speed, high-altitude scenarios. The Rafale performs better in mixed-environment multi-role scenarios where electronic warfare and sensor fusion play a larger role. In neither set of exercises does either aircraft dominate the other comprehensively. They are genuinely comparable aircraft that are better at different things, and the outcome of any specific engagement depends heavily on the scenario, the rules of engagement, the training and experience of the pilots, and the specific configuration of the aircraft. One particularly interesting data point comes from exercises involving both aircraft operating against simulated advanced surface-to-air missile threats. In those scenarios, the Rafale Spectra electronic warfare system has reportedly provided meaningful advantages, allowing Rafales to operate in threat environments that imposed greater limitations on Typhoons. That finding is consistent with the general assessment of Spectra as a genuinely exceptional electronic warfare system, and it has influenced at least some export decisions by nations operating in regions with sophisticated air defense networks. Another interesting data point comes from Indian Air Force exercises. India ordered Rafales after a long competition that originally included the Typhoon. The specific reasons for India's choice were complex and involved industrial offset requirements, price negotiations, and political considerations as well as pure capability assessment. But Indian pilots who have flown both types in exercises have reportedly expressed consistent appreciation for the Rafale sensor fusion and multi-role flexibility. While acknowledging the Typhoon's impressive high-altitude performance, India's choice of the Rafale reflected a judgment that for India's specific operational requirements, which include both air defense and ground strike missions across diverse geographic and threat environments, the Rafale's balanced capability made it the better choice. Qatar's decision to buy both aircraft is perhaps the most interesting case study of all. Qatar ordered 36 Rafales and 24 Typhoons, ultimately operating both types. That is an unusual procurement decision that reflects both political relationships with both France and Britain and a genuine recognition that the two aircraft have different strengths. Qatar effectively decided that a mixed fleet giving it access to both aircraft's capabilities was worth the additional training and logistics complexity. That decision implicitly validates the view that neither aircraft is so superior that it makes the other irrelevant. They are different tools for different situations, and a nation wealthy enough to buy both might reasonably choose to do exactly that. Now let us talk about where these aircraft are going, because both programs are actively evolving and the next decade will see significant changes in both aircraft's capabilities. The Eurofighter Consortium is developing what is called Project Kalis and related upgrade programs, including the potential integration of the latest generation Captori radar variants with significantly expanded aperture, and therefore range and resolution. There are ongoing efforts to improve the Typhoon's electronic warfare capability, to integrate new weapons including hypersonic missiles, and to develop a new cockpit architecture that reduces pilot workload and improves situational awareness. Germany, which has faced significant challenges funding Typhoon upgrades due to defense budget constraints, has committed to continued Typhoon investment, though the pace and ambition of German contributions have sometimes frustrated partner nations. The United Kingdom, which operates Typhoons alongside the F-35B in a mixed fleet, has invested heavily in Typhoon upgrades and sees the aircraft as a critical capability bridge until next-generation platforms arrive. Italy and Spain continue to operate and upgrade their Typhoons, though Italian interest in potential alternatives including the F-35 has complicated long-term planning for the program. The Rafale F4 Standard, which is currently being delivered to France and some export customers, represents a significant capability upgrade. It introduces improved radar performance, enhanced sensor fusion, new electronic warfare capabilities, improved weapon integration including new versions of the Meteor and Mica missiles, and an upgraded cockpit with a wider field of view display system. The F4 Standard also introduces helmet-mounted display improvements that allow pilots to cue weapons simply by looking at the target, a capability that provides decisive advantages in close-range combat. France is also investing in the SCAF program, the Future Combat Air System, which is a collaborative program with Germany and Spain to develop a next-generation fighter to replace the Rafale in the 2040s. That program has faced its own political and industrial complications, but it represents France's long-term vision for maintaining an independent European air power capability. Both aircraft will also increasingly need to work alongside unmanned systems. The concept of the loyal wingman, in which a crewed fighter operates in concert with multiple unmanned aircraft that extend its sensor reach, carry additional weapons, and perform high-risk tasks, is central to both the British Tempest next-generation fighter program and the Franco-German SCAF program. The Typhoon and Rafale will likely serve as transition aircraft bridging current operations and the manned-unmanned teamed future, and upgrades to both aircraft are beginning to incorporate the connectivity and data standards required for that future. So let us get to the fundamental question: which European jet really wins? And the honest answer, the answer that anyone who has studied these aircraft seriously will give you, is that it depends entirely on what you need it to do and in what environment. If you are building an air force whose primary mission is air defense of your own territory, and you need an aircraft that can intercept threats at high altitude and high speed with maximum performance, the Typhoon is your aircraft. Its kinematic performance, its Meteor missile integration, its supercruise capability, and its high-altitude agility make it arguably the most capable air superiority fighter in European service. In that specific mission, in that specific environment, the Typhoon wins. That is not a close call. If you are building an air force that needs to do everything, fly from a carrier, strike ground targets in contested airspace, maintain an independent nuclear deterrent, deploy to diverse theaters with limited support infrastructure, operate against sophisticated air defense networks, and fight other aircraft when necessary, the Rafale is your aircraft. Its versatility, its electronic warfare capability, its carrier compatibility, its sensor fusion, and its operational independence from any external partner make it the more complete military tool. In that broader operational context, the Rafale wins. That is also not a close call. The comparison gets more interesting when you try to establish an absolute ranking across all missions, because no single scenario captures everything that matters. In a pure air superiority scenario at high altitude, Typhoon wins. In a deep strike mission against a heavily defended target, the Rafale Spectra system gives it the edge. In a carrier operation, the Rafale wins by default because the Typhoon cannot operate from carriers. In an air policing mission requiring sustained supersonic dash performance, the Typhoon wins. In a multi-role exercise where pilots must transition between air-to-air and air-to-ground within the same sortie, the Rafale wins. In a network-centric scenario where multiple aircraft share data, both are competitive. In electronic warfare, the Rafale wins. In raw speed and climb rate, the Typhoon wins. If you average all of those across all scenarios, the aircraft come out extremely close, which is exactly what you would expect from two world-class jets built by some of the finest aerospace engineers in Europe. But that arithmetic average obscures something important about the nature of military capability. It is not about being slightly better at the most things. It is about being decisive in the scenarios that actually matter. And the scenarios that will define European air power over the next 2 decades: deep strikes against defended targets, independent operations without American support, nuclear deterrence, multi-domain operations in contested airspace, lean toward the Rafale's capability profile more than the Typhoon's. The export market has reached a similar conclusion, slowly and painfully from France's perspective, but clearly. The Rafale's export success in recent years, winning competitions in India, Egypt, Qatar, Greece, Croatia, Indonesia, and the UAE, reflects a genuine market assessment that its capability profile and the operational independence it provides are worth the premium price. The Typhoon continues to find buyers among nations with specific air superiority requirements and strong political ties to the Typhoon consortium nations, but the Rafale has won the broader global competition for the balanced multi-role market. There is one more dimension to this comparison that rarely gets discussed in the technical publications but matters enormously in the real world of military aviation, and that is sustainability, meaning the ability to keep aircraft flying at high sortie rates over a sustained period of conflict. Both aircraft are complex, sophisticated machines requiring skilled maintenance, specialized parts, and significant logistical support. But the Rafale's single-nation origin means France controls its entire supply chain. Every component, every software update, every weapons integration decision is under French control. There is no consortium meeting required to approve an emergency upgrade. There is no partner nation that can slow down a critical modification. France can react to new threats, integrate new weapons, and adapt the aircraft's capabilities in a timeframe that the Typhoon consortium simply cannot match due to its multinational governance structure. That operational agility, the ability to respond quickly to emerging threats and operational needs, is an increasingly valuable capability as the pace of technological change accelerates. The Typhoon consortium has made genuine efforts to streamline its decision-making and improve the pace of upgrades, but the structural reality of 4 sovereign nations with different priorities, different budgets, and different industrial interests creates friction that does not exist in France's single-nation Rafale program. The Typhoon's consortium structure does provide one advantage that France sometimes envies, which is burden sharing. The enormous cost of developing, producing, and sustaining a modern combat aircraft is shared across 4 nations, reducing the per-nation investment required. France bears the entire Rafale development and sustainment cost alone, which has been a genuine financial strain even for an economy the size of France's. The export sales that were so painfully absent for the Rafale's first decade of competition and have flowed more freely in recent years are not just commercially important. They are strategically essential for managing the program's economics and keeping Dassault's production lines efficient. The bottom line on this comparison is that both aircraft are genuinely excellent, and both will remain relevant military tools for the foreseeable future. Anyone who tells you one is simply incomprehensibly superior to the other is either uninformed or has an agenda. They were designed differently, optimized for different priorities, and they reflect different national visions of what air power should be. The Typhoon is the finest pure air superiority fighter in European service. In that mission, in that envelope, there is nothing on the continent that matches it. The Rafale is the most complete combat aircraft in European service, in the full breadth of what a modern combat jet needs to do, from the carrier deck to the nuclear deterrence mission to the deep strike mission to the close air support mission to the air superiority mission. The Rafale covers more ground more comprehensively than any other European aircraft. Which one wins? The Typhoon wins in a straight-up air battle at high altitude. The Rafale wins in a comprehensive military competition across all missions. And both answers are simultaneously true. That is the honest assessment of 2 extraordinary machines built by extraordinary people who dedicated their professional lives to protecting their nation's skies. What makes this rivalry genuinely fascinating is not that one aircraft crushes the other. It is that 2 different nations with 2 different philosophies of military aviation produce 2 aircraft that are both world-class, both battle-tested, both commercially successful, and both genuinely superior to almost everything else their potential adversaries can put in the air. Europe, despite its political complications and its complex defense relationships, built 2 of the best combat aircraft on the planet. That is a remarkable achievement that tends to get lost in the debate about which one is marginally better in specific scenarios. Both the Typhoon and the Rafale represent the pinnacle of what fourth generation plus aviation can achieve. Both have been in combat and performed. Both are being continuously improved. Both will be in service for decades to come. And both nations that built them have every right to be genuinely proud of what their engineers and test pilots and industrial workers accomplished. For any nation choosing between them, the advice of almost every serious analyst is the same. Know what you need. Know what environment you will operate in. Know what your political requirements are regarding operational independence. Know your budget. And then choose the aircraft that best serves those specific requirements rather than trying to determine which jet is globally superior in some abstract sense, because that question does not have a clean answer. They are too close, too different, and too